Welcome to Alberta Conservation Association's Harvest Your Own podcast, the resource for everything hunting, navigating through the field, the butcher shop, and the kitchen. Life is all about great food. Let's get started.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Brad Fenson, an avid outdoor enthusiast who has worked as a freelance journalist, photographer, and public speaker for over 3 decades. I have hunted, fished, and foraged all my life and hope to share my passion for the outdoors. Along the way, I want to encourage everyone to harvest wild proteins and enjoy the satisfaction of providing the next meal for your family. Our goal is to educate, entertain, and inspire individuals to get outdoors and create a connection between food, health, and your future meals. Welcome to Harvest Your Own. Today we have people from High Caliber Products. We have Leanne and Aaron from Calgary and Aaron McLaughlin, also from Calgary. Both have extensive knowledge in the food industry and specifically with meat and meat handling equipment and spices. And that's where we're going today. How to transform your wild game into sausage and jerky and other meat treats, as I call them. Welcome to the show.
Great. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Thank you.
Leanne, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into this industry, and what exactly do you do at High Caliber?
Wow. I have, it's been a nice journey. We've had a great, strong core people that we've been together over 25 years. So I started out in Edmonton in the restaurant industry. And when I moved to Calgary, I got the opportunity to work with a group of people that were fun, innovative, in the fast-moving commercial refrigeration industry, and then with a retail side of hunters and processing meat equipment. Food has always intrigued me, so it's been a really a big learning experience to kind of come full circle and have the background in the restaurant industry as well as the meat processing industry. And we take it from hunters and homeowners to commercial customers. So it's a really big, engaging demographic and lots of fun. So we've been learning many, many things as food trends change and our industry over the years. So it's been a lot of fun.
Well, our listeners will be very interested. We have people that are seasoned hunters that are on here that want to learn more about doing things on their own. And of course, a big part of our audience is what we call the newbies, people that haven't dabbled in hunting and the outdoors and meat processing, but really want to learn more and start it. Aaron, I looked you up, some of your past history, and it's extensive. To say you're a seasoned, a little spice pun in there, seasoned meat cutter would be an understatement. You have a lot of experience, and obviously you're a great instructor and teacher.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. No, I started when I was about 13 doing this. So I've been doing this for coming up to 22 years now. And I've been very fortunate that I've been able to work in most avenues within the meat industry, everywhere from kind of small butcher shops to abattoirs, and even instructing at Olds College for about 6 years. It's been a good journey, kind of like what Leanne was saying. It's been a lot of fun, and there's always things changing within the industry, and it's been a good time, and it's always nice to come onto these and help, like you said, new people, and as well as people that have been doing this, and get them to doing things kind of, just a bit better and a bit more consistently.
Right. So I'm sure everyone's seen the headlines in the last couple of years about there's a new surge of people getting into the hunting realm to gather their own organic meats and take it up for the first time. And actually a lot of people that we wouldn't expect to get into it. So it is an interesting time. There's a big learning curve for some people. Processing game is probably one of my favorite things to do associated with hunting. It sort of gives me that closure, the completeness, and a sense of satisfaction when things are done and you close the freezer door and you did it yourself. So making sausage is a very important part of that. Just a quick story. A couple of years ago, many years ago, I showed my friends how to make sausage, and we went kind of crazy. We made 2,200 pounds that year because when you first start out and you make one batch and it's good, you got to try another one. And it was back in the days when we had multiple deer tags and all the rest of it. So we had lots of meat to deal with. But that's something that the listeners can look forward to is once you embrace this, it becomes a lifestyle. It becomes part of your meal planning and everything you do. So why don't we kick it off by starting right at the basics? Somebody went out hunting, they shot a deer. Aaron, what cuts would be the best for sausage?
So when it comes to making sausage, essentially anything from the entire animal carcass is good for sausage making. It really depends on what the person wants out of that carcass. If they want some steaks and roast, things of that nature, of course your back straps or your loins always going to make the best steaks. But then moving into your hips, some of that area is good for roast, as well as there are some decent steaks out of that as well. Your shoulder cuts are mainly going to go into grinds, just because where the animal is being dropped and everything of that nature, as well as those are typically your tougher cuts. But if you were looking to be making sausage out of this, and that's what you wanted was lots of sausage, your entire carcass would be fine for that.
Yes, and I know with commercial operations, that is true. They put if somebody takes a whole deer in and says, I want the whole thing into sausage, that's exactly what happens. There's a few cuts that I recommend hunters keep out, and that's some of the shanks, a lot more connective tissue in there, and they're much better suited for slow cooking and braising and cooking that collagen and gelatin out of them. Sometimes people get what they call chewy bits in their sausage, and nobody likes that. And that brings us to another thing is, what do you need for equipment? And, how do you prevent those larger pieces of connective tissue from being in the sausage?
So part of that, the first part of that would be the trimming of it. So those tough pieces, that connective tissue, that needs to be cut out. So before you do any grinding, and I'll pass that to Leanne when we start talking about the equipment, but before any of that happens, that meat needs to be prepped properly. So it needs to be handled or field dressed properly, making sure you're keeping that as clean as possible. And then it needs to be transported properly, once again, keeping it clean. And then when you actually do start the butchering process, you need to make sure that, that heavy silver skin, the stuff that you can't see through, that you can't pinch through, that is removed, because that is a lot of that chewy bits that people would find in their sausage, as well as how that carcass is aged and further processed. It plays a major role in essentially the quality of your sausage meat when you start grinding it. I could go into, we could probably talk for 40 minutes about how to properly, I'd say, age your game carcass. But the biggest issue I find people run into is that they try to, age it, 14 days, something like that, when they're going to be making the whole thing into sausage. You don't need to age something that's going to be going into trim. Game meats, they just don't have that fat on the outside to protect the actual meat. And so you end up drying out most of the carcass and the entire outside. And then that dry section, if it's not trimmed off and ends up in your grinds, will become quite chewy and noticeable.
Absolutely. And basically what I tell people is you get out what you put in. So quality management is key. And you hit on the high points. I mean, those thick silvers are the ones that need to be trimmed out. There's a lot of connective tissues, though, that are going to mince up or cook out when you do that, and getting to learn which ones to remove and which ones are good is important, because I also know some people that spend 16, 18 hours to cut up a deer and trim out every single line that's in there, but that's not necessary either. Exactly.
And that is the tough part that about, I would say, butchering, is that a lot of the essentials and these types of things are learned through actually doing it, practicing it. So that's why kind of the work that we're doing with CTR is so nice, because we're trying to get that information, to the home processor, so that, they don't have to be a butcher for 15 years to finally learn, what silver skin is fine and which one isn't.
Right. Leanne, I think another important part of starting off making ground meat is having the right equipment. Now, I remember back in the day, I had a hand grinder and often made a burger at home, and we made a motor. I think we took a motor out of a dryer or something and put a belt on it and sped it up, which probably isn't the safest thing to use when you're pushing in with your fingertips. But quality grinder is worth its weight in meat and then some. But it's very important to keep the blades and stuff sharp too, and that's what keeps those chewy bits out of there as well.
Yes, that's right. We have a really great selection of all types of equipment, including meat grinders. Some would not be, we would not recommend for using with wild game, just not the strength involved there. And then we do have other larger grinders, and that would do the job much better. We do carry plates and knives, and we do have information on our website in terms of the proper use and storage. Aaron has been instrumental in creating all of these videos and blogs and things like that. So there is, because these things are quite an investment, we want to make sure that everybody has good results and protects their investments accordingly. So
yeah, it's funny.
It's a fun opportunity, but yeah, there's a lot involved there.
There is. And when I first got started, there were 6 of us went together and bought our first grinder. And, since that time we've moved on, we've all bought our own. And the one thing that we learned is with the high amount of game meat that we were putting through it, buying one that is a little bit bigger and beefier made a big difference. I don't know if you have a recommendation in terms of horsepower or throat size for a grinder for wild game, but I'd almost tell people to buy something one size bigger than they think they need, because they're probably going to use it more than they anticipate.
I would recommend that exactly. Aaron is very good when we hold the classes either in person or online to kind of go through all the aspects of all the equipment. And that, I think, just understanding all of the points, each step of sausage making is very important. So one will, lead into the other. So knowing, like you were talking about trim, that's kind of the first point. So as we go into each step, it's all very important, making sure that your meat is cold and the grinder plates and knives are sharp and in good condition and stored properly. And then with the meat grinders, you're exactly right. Having a good size that won't stress the machine. And we have probably a good 4 or 5 different sizes of meat grinders. And you're right. We recommend at the very minimum a half horsepower, and then it goes up to 1.3, and then we can get larger ones also. So we'll be able to steer you in the right direction.
Yes, I do like the larger horsepower grinders, just because there's been a few years when we went out and came home with 2 moose and an elk, and you find out that if you're going to run it for any length of time, you need the horsepower to get through it all and to keep everything in good working condition and the blade sharp. So that is important for sure. Where can they find more information on the products?
We have a really great website, highcaliberproducts.com, and we have all of our items on there, as well as videos, blogs with information and on in terms of pertinent and timely information. I think all of those are on a YouTube source also, but right through our website is the main resource.
There are links, and there's also introductions to sausage making and some recipes for some fresh sausage on Harvest Your Own. It's always a good place to check out to get started.
This podcast is produced for Harvest Your Own, a program dedicated to those who want to reconnect with food and health through their experiences outdoors. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a resource for individuals to learn more about hunting and the outdoors. There's information to get you started and ensure that your compass stays pointed in the right direction to be successful. Where's your next meal coming from?
Aaron, you talked briefly about aging a carcass and wild game drying out. Let's jump right into the sausage making in terms of what meats you'd use, if you'd blend, and moisture management, because that's really important in terms of consistency and having a product that everyone's happy with.
Right. Yeah. So naturally, like your game meat block is very, very lean. By the time you're done trimming, and you have your meat block ready to be made into sausage, it's probably close to, I'd say 95 to 99% lean. Like there's next to no fat on a lot of these animals. So in order to get a decent sausage product, you need to incorporate a fat of some sort into it. And of course, the most common one is pork fat. That's going to give you the best consistency in your sausage as well as the best flavor. And one of the areas where people really, I would say, kind of miss the boat a little bit is they always think you need to add pork trim into your meat block. But the issue with that is that the pork trim itself is already, naturally possibly at, kind of that 80-20, 70-30 fat to meat ratio. So when you add in that pork trim, trying to get that to, fatten and moisten up the game meat block, it's not enough fat because you're also adding in lean meat to that meat block. So the best way and the most straightforward way is to just add straight fat. So once again, pork fat is the best. You can use other fats such as beef fat. Lamb fat has been used as well. You do definitely get different flavor profiles, but the fat is essentially the only thing that needs to be added in.
Yes, often I'll use pork, and if I'm going to use a particular cut of it, I would use front shoulder because it has a good ratio of fat, even though it is still got a fair bit of lean meat. But I think the front shoulder or butts are very common in a lot of the places that make wild game sausage. They refer to them, that's what they use and charge you for the extra that's put in the sausage. So
yes.
The fat, do you grind it fine, coarse? Of course, it's important. One of the most important things is to blend it properly with the wild game.
Yes. So when you're adding in the fat or the pork trim, whatever you're adding into it, it needs to just become part of the meat block. So when you grind your meat through the first time, the fat also gets ground through with it, because that meat with that incorporated fat weight is what is going to make up your new meat block weight. So it all needs to be ground through at the same time, at the same consistency. So whether you like a coarse sausage or a fine grind is really irrelevant, just as long as all of this is being ground through at the same time.
So here's a question I get quite often, and this will depend on what kind of sausage you're making. Is it important to double grind it?
I would say yes, and it definitely does come down to what you said, is it depends on the type of sausage. If you're making something that's going to be having kind of a bit more of that chunkier texture, one grind you could get away with, but I would often recommend going to just more of a coarse plate to get that kind of chunkiness that you're after. I always do really like a double grind. And the reason being is that's going to give you the best bind in your sausage and give you the best result. So when we start talking about the bind and the mixing of sausage and everything like that, that'll kind of come into play. But I'm a big proponent of a double grind.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense in terms of getting a consistent product that is the quality you want. Like it looks like it's store-bought. It holds together. It doesn't crumble when you cut it up, or it just takes it to the next level.
It does. And that right there, like a crumbly sausage, that is, like that is the key indication of a poorly made sausage where something's gone wrong.
Right.
Whether it was too much water, too much fat, not enough mixing, whatever the issue was, that's when you have a poor result. Like you said, when it holds together, that's when you're doing it properly.
I think a great starting point for most people is to make a fresh sausage. Don't worry about measuring nitrates and smoking and all the rest of it, make a simple breakfast sausage or a fresh Italian. Leanne, how important is it to have fresh spices instead of something that might have been in your cupboard for 6 years?
Yeah, that's really important. I think, as Aaron was saying, each ingredient for sausage making, it's as good as the ingredients that you put in. So to have nice, flavorful spices is going to make a really big difference in terms of the flavor and the outcome, the look of it, of your sausage. And of course, because of all the time, effort, and expense that you put into this, you want to have, the best results possible. So, spices are a key ingredient to sausage making for many reasons. And so having a good quality spice blend is very important.
I do a lot of cooking and a lot of sausage making, and I do like your spices. They're fresh. They come in larger packages, but the large packages are often more economical than buying a small one in the store. So it's worth checking them out. You do list all your different spices on your website. Fresh sausage, simple recipes. Let's talk about making like a breakfast sausage. You got salt, pepper, sage, maybe a bit of garlic. It's, you got some pork and some wild game. If people don't want to try mixing their own spices, they can buy kits. High Caliber has lots of different options. But Aaron, how important is it to measure your ingredients?
Yeah, it's extremely important. And not just measuring them, but keeping a record of what you're using in your recipe. My favorite way to measure, and the only way that I teach people how to measure sausage is by actually weighing out the ingredients. So I'll often do that in grams, and it's grams per kilo. And the reason I like this is because it then doesn't matter how much of a meat block you have, whether you have 20 pounds or 200 pounds. The same recipe will be easily converted into whatever weight you have, as well as it's going to be consistent throughout. So that 20-pound batch is going to taste the exact same as that 200-pound batch. And that's probably one of the biggest issues I find with home processors, is that they have a lot of these recipes that are handed down, from their parents, or they're getting them offline. They're just kind of making them up as they go, which is all fun, and I definitely encourage that. But you need to have a consistent measuring method. And a lot of the times you find it's a teaspoon or a tablespoon or a handful or eyeball this and eyeball that, and you're never going to get a consistent result by doing that. So the best way is to actually weigh out the ingredients.
If you talk to a baker, they do the same thing. Everything is by weight, grams per kilogram, and it makes it foolproof.
Exactly.
I noticed you did have some tutorials on the site and some YouTubes about getting started with sausage making, and it's a great introduction for people that want to understand weighing ingredients and what type of meat to use and get started in this. There's lots of different options too. When you make fresh sausage, you don't have to case it. So it's easy to do. It's easy to try. You can make it into patties. You can actually get burger bags and put it in burger bags to make chubs that can be cut into patties afterwards. Leanne, what kind of specialized equipment do you need for your grinder to utilize those burger bags?
Really not too much. We do have a stuffer attachment for grinders. So if you're doing something of a larger caliber, those just make it much easier to put the sausage meat into the casing or bag, whatever you prefer. So it's really just a small little addition to your grinder or your stuffer that will put it right into there and, make storage and labeling and longevity a factor. So we do carry just a number of different things depending on how you are packaging it. We can probably find a solution for you.
Yeah, and that's an important consideration when you're looking at grinders, to make sure that they can handle the attachments or have one that fits. But I do love the burger bags because you can, like I said, make a chub and cut it into patties to fry up at any time or throw on the grill. When I first started making sausage, I didn't have any fancy equipment, so I actually used to measure out the meat and roll it in wax paper just to get it into a chub to cut it up later. So people that are taking their first steps, you don't have to spend a lot of money. There are ways to make this happen. I've got an old family recipe that's over 100 years old from from Germany for making sausage, and I boil pickling spice, and it's got pepper and fresh garlic and stuff in it, and it's one of my favorites. You do have to sort of make a 50-pound batch, or you're always guessing about what ingredients you use. The nice thing about High Caliber is you've got a bunch of pre-made sausage kits with all the spices and, like pick a flavor. You probably have the option for it.
Yeah, well, we've had, many years to kind of hone our spice blends. We really take them very personally, and we love each spice blend that we have. They're blended just for us, and they're not just a run-of-the-mill kind of recipe. So these have been tested for many years, and we love each one of them as they are. They are a base, so if you wanted to add any different ingredient, you can. And as Aaron said, definitely recommended to write it down in a recipe, which we do have recipe cards for most of our blends. So that's a great way to add what size of casing that you used, how you made it, what type of meat you used, and just adding all those little details as a nice reference. So we have many spice blends. I don't know off the top of my head, but they depending on if you're gluten free, we do have different lines that cater to some of the different interests out there.
Yeah, I noticed you have a wide variety. Aaron, getting back to using those kits and making the sausage, do you have to add moisture, like water, to the sausage to get the right consistency? And can you put in too much?
Yes, absolutely. So moisture is a necessary ingredient. There's two necessary ingredients when you're making a batch of sausage. One is salt, and then the other, of course, being water or a liquid of some kind. But yeah, definitely water is needed for the proper, I would say, mouthfeel and consistency of sausage. So what I always recommend is 100 grams per kilo. That's going to give you a great result every time. When you start going above that 100 grams per kilo, that's when you're starting to get into the too much area. So really anything over 200 grams per kilo starts needing to have some sort of additive introduced in order to hold that water together. You mentioned earlier, about crumbly sausage. Too much water is a way to get that. So it is needed for the proper texture, but you can have too much. So if you are using the premixes, like the CTR ones, it has it right on there how much water to use. And if you're ever doing a recipe from home and it's calling for water and things of that nature, if you weigh it out at 100 grams per kilo, you're going to get a great result every time.
Yeah, that's great advice. Now, Leanne mentioned earlier, or someone did, about having the grinder plates and blades and stuff in the freezer and having them cold. Would it be advised for people to grind ice of the same weight into their sausage when they're making it?
Yeah, so I see that a lot, people saying to use ice. And I do like using ice when I'm doing large batches, kind of more at, at the butcher shop, at large scale. When I'm ever doing something at home and, if I'm only doing 20 pounds, something like that, I like to use ice water. So I'll just put ice into my water, get it just as, basically, as cold as you can. And then just use that ice water. I just find it's easier for the mixing at home when you don't have great big mixers and that kind of stuff. It's just a lot easier to handle, and then I just get a better consistency throughout. You can absolutely use ice, but like I said, I just find the best thing for home use is ice water.
Yes, I know some people I've talked to in the past, they let things warm up a little bit because it was hard on their hands to mix it, but yes, you're better off to get nitrate gloves and make sure you get in there and keep things cold to mix it to get the best quality possible in the end.
Absolutely, yeah. If you're letting things warm up, and I've seen it all too. I've seen people say, "Well, I'll put hot water in because it's easier to mix with the hands," but you're just ruining the the integrity of the actual meat block. When you start warming it up, that's when the fat starts to render out, and you get smearing and grease spots and pockets, and you can even end up with crumbly sausage. So yeah, keeping everything as cold as possible is key.
Could you give us some tips in terms of getting started, in terms of picking a casing and how to case sausage, if people want to take it from a patty and a chub to the next up of actually making links or coils?
Yeah, so my favorite sausage casing to use is, of course, your fresh or your natural hog casing. I just like it because it is universal. It can be used for fresh sausage. It can go into a smokehouse. But I've had a lot of experience with it. I know it's intimidating for some people because they look at it, well, do I have to wash it out? Do I have to rinse it? How do I store it? How do you untangle it? That kind of stuff. So like in our classes, we do talk about it and go over and really simplify that whole thing. Like I said, I do really enjoy working with that one. But if somebody's getting started out, I always recommend them go for a collagen casing. There's no soaking needed. They're ready to use right off the bat. All you have to do is make sure that you're getting the right one for your sausage, because there is a difference between a collagen casing that is going to be going into a smokehouse versus a collagen casing that is just going to be used for a breakfast sausage or a regular fried sausage. So that's all clearly labeled on the package. So make sure you get the right one, and then make sure that it goes on the proper direction, because there is only one way that collagen casing can go onto the sausage horn. If it goes on backwards, it will be hard to use.
Yeah, it basically doesn't come off.
Yeah.
Great advice. Now, what are some of our options for actually getting the meat in the casing?
So of course, you can always start, because you have to have a grinder to get your meat block made. So you can start by doing the attachments that come right with the grinders. Some of them do come with a sausage stuffing attachment. I'm not the biggest fan of them because I don't feel it's going to give you the best result. You do end up with some pockets of air. You don't have as much control. So my favorite thing is a hand press. With a hand press, you can decide the speed. You can decide, you can easily stop it. It's just a lot better feel and a lot better result, I find, for a person. When you start out with a hand press, you can definitely, start with two people, one person doing the cranking, the other person controlling, the tension on the casing and how full the actual sausage is. And then eventually you'll get to a point where you can just do it all on your own.
Right. It's an art and a science. Part of it's feel in terms of how much pressure's in the casing, and you want to make sure there's no airspace. And I actually pinch mine while I'm making them to make sure I define the links and make it easier to separate afterwards. But everyone has different techniques. But again, the tutorials you have, and not just tutorials, but you actually have classroom courses that you put on where people can come in and see this firsthand and ask questions and be involved.
Yeah, we do those right at CTR in Calgary, and then they do CTR up in Edmonton as well, run some classes. But I do the ones in Calgary, and they're great. They really are, because, like you said, you get the firsthand experience, and it's so necessary for a lot of people because they can watch YouTube videos all day long, and they don't get it until somebody actually shows them, and they actually get the feel for it, and that's when you really start to see a lot of learning happening. Unfortunately, when COVID kind of hit, it shut down all the classes, but I think we're looking at maybe in the fall or something. You'll have to check with Leanne, but we are looking at getting some of those in-person classes started again. And I think coming up at the end of the month here, we're trying some online classes where people can kind of follow along. But definitely the class experience is a big benefit to either people just starting out or people that have been making game sausage at home for 20 years. Yeah,
it really shortens the learning curve to get a consistent and quality product in the end. So I think that the courses and the online opportunities are an excellent way for people to either up their game or learn to get into sausage making in the first place.
This podcast was made possible by Alberta Conservation Association and the Harvest Your Own community. If you're interested in harvesting your own food, there's a comprehensive collection of information. To gain insight and knowledge, head to the field, harvest your own protein, prepare it, and taste the results. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a library of information from getting started and geared up to processing, butchering, and cooking wild game to make the connection between health and food.
You know, the next step, people make fresh, we've cased sausage. Let's talk about the importance of cures, nitrates and nitrites, and the importance of measuring those. It's one thing to have a little too much garlic or pepper in your sausage, but you want to be more careful with the nitrates and nitrates.
Yeah, so the nitrites and nitrates, those are additives, and those are only needed for product that's going to be going into a smokehouse. So like a smoky, a pepperoni, something like that. Or if it's going to, be the dry age or the dry cured type of sausage. So it is very important that those are actually measured out and the directions are followed, because they can, make you sick if you put too much into it. When it comes to the nitrites, those are more of a kind of a fast acting cure. So once again, that's all you would be needing for something that's going into a smokehouse. Whereas the nitrate, that's only for long curing processes. So that's only to be used when product is, you're making a dry salami or something like that. So what most people will be working with is the actual nitrite. And as long as the directions are followed, they're very clearly mapped out on whichever nitrite that you're buying. It'll tell you how much to use per how much meat. Usually it works out to about 3.4 grams per kilo of meat. And that's going to give you the actual result that you need. But the biggest thing is people always say, well, when do I need to use it and why? And so like I said, if it's a product that's going into a smokehouse, it's necessary because it inhibits the growth of any kind of bacteria when you are holding it in these low temperatures. When product goes into a smokehouse, it's being held essentially in the danger zone. And the danger zone in food handling is an area in which bacteria can multiply. So we're holding these in these low temperatures for extended periods of time while we're smoking them and getting them ready for smoke. So then you're basically just allowing bacteria to grow. Nitrites are essentially our only defense we have against growing most bacteria in these areas, and especially botulism. That is the main one that nitrite will inhibit and prevent from growing. And in a smokehouse, so a low temperature, there's moisture, and it's an airless environment, is the perfect breeding ground for that. And that's why nitrites are so important and must be used in product going into a smokehouse.
Right. Don't make smoked sausage with just salt in it. That's a very good message. What are those products labeled under when they go into high caliber? What are the nitrates actually called on the shelf?
Well, each of our packages are labeled with all allergens and ingredients. So each package will have, if it's a fresh sausage, it will not contain the sodium nitrite. If it's intended for smoking, it will have a small package of sodium nitrite separately inside, and it'll be labeled and cure on the package and clearly labeled in the ingredients. So whether you make that as a fresh sausage, each of our blends you can make as a fresh sausage, of course. And if you are intending to smoke it, then you would definitely add the cure according to the instructions that Aaron just gave.
Right. Well, we've run through a lot. Bringing a deer home, what cuts you use, how to trim it, how to grind it, how to mix it with pork, different spice options, to putting it in casings, adding cure, and why you would need to use it. Are there any last words of wisdom for people that either make sausage or want to get into it to take it to the next level in the coming year?
Yeah, I would say just keep it simple to start. If you're new to this, can be a very confusing journey to go into. So definitely keep it simple to start. I always recommend people, if it's the first time they're making it, get the premix. That way you don't have to go out and buy all the spices and try and figure out a recipe and the weighing and all of that. These premixes that CTR offers, the directions are right on the bag. They're very easy to use. And then just see if you actually like the process. I know some people, they get into it and they say, they'll make their 100 pounds of sausage and say, well, I never want to do that again. And that's fine. You can take it to the butcher, whatever, but definitely start out small, see if you like it, and then you can always grow from there.
Yeah, great advice. The stores are wonderful to go into. Anyone that likes processing game and likes making sausage, you're like a kid in a candy store. So I would encourage everyone to get in there and check it out. But if not, at least start online, highcaliberproducts.com. Yeah, it's a great place to start. Now there's a ton of information on there, and just the different blends for sausages and jerky mixes will catch the eye of most hunters. At the bottom of the first page, there's some tutorials that you can look at, and you can actually ask Aaron questions too about sausage making and other things that come up. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, we're just, Aaron's been such a great consultant for us over the years, and we're trying new avenues to make this whole process more engaging and, for everybody to get better results. So we can definitely, you can email your questions, and we can, Aaron will answer them in a timely method. So yeah, we're just trying to have our great leader here kind of take us all through the fun aspect of sausage making. And it's a great family activity, social activity. Our tagline is trust the tradition, aim for adventure. So it has the whole aspect of this whole lifestyle. So we really take that to heart for everyone at High Caliber here in both Edmonton and Calgary.
Yeah, it really does become a lifestyle. Our kids come out and help us, and they help package, and everyone's got to fry up some samples and try them. It's usually a very fun event, and like I said, we've got lots of friends that have got into it, so it's always a big event. We plan them regularly. I'm really hoping someday I can get to one of Aaron's classes. I love making sausage, but what I've discovered in life is if you keep your eyes open, you can always learn something. And somebody with your experience would obviously be a good mentor and someone to stand beside and just take notes. So I'd like to thank both of you very much for coming on the show. I think this is an important topic. I get tons of questions from people wanting to start their own sausage making. And perhaps we could follow this up in the future with some smoking and curing and jerky information for another episode.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Brad.
We hope to inspire people to reconnect with nature and appreciate where your food comes from by harvesting your own. For more information on getting started or to learn specifics about the Field to Fork experience, visit harvestyourown.ca and follow on Facebook and Instagram. Check back often for new material, recipes, and videos that are posted regularly. Please subscribe to Harvest Your Own podcast and take the time to rate and review the show to help us build a dedicated core of passionate hunters as our regular audience. Until next time, embrace the outdoors and all it has to offer. Thanks for joining us.